So I'm going to assume you know a little bit about Warhammer 40k, Grimdark Future, Imperium of Man, Space Marines, Xenos, Chaos, and a near-dead Emperor of Mankind who needs 1,000 people with psychic powers to be sacrificed per day to keep his body from falling apart for reasons that would take too long to get into. Anyway, Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate Daemonhunters is a turn-based strategy game that takes place in this universe and shows off one of my favorite factions within the setting, the Grey Knights. So who are the Grey Knights? Well, the best analogy I can think of on the spot is, you know, the Doom guy, the best in the business of killing demons, pretty incorruptible, been literally through hell and back a million times without breaking a sweat. Now imagine you gave him psychic powers and the best weapons and gear from a galaxy-spanning empire, and that would basically describe your average Grey Knight. And because this is Warhammer 40k, the scale of everything is near ridiculous, so instead of there just being a few of these ultra elite demon killing super soldiers, there's an entire chapter of at least 1,000 of them. Which is still not enough for the job they need to do, and I know 1,000 sounds like a lot, but they need to cover an entire galaxy where chaos and demonic invasions are happening like every 5 minutes across countless worlds, so if anything they are way understaffed. They also have to keep their existence a secret from most of the Imperium, since if your average human in this universe found out that chaos gods and demons who the Grey Knights were created to fight against were actually real, there is a high chance of way more cults and demonic activities springing up all over the galaxy, since the chaos gods are really good at tempting regular humans and even the super loyal space marines, and some of their primarchs. And all of that is already happening with humanity just vaguely being aware of chaos. So the logic goes, if you don't know about it, you can't be tempted. Which means if you're not an extremely high-ranking Imperial official or part of the Inquisition and you run into the Grey Knights, you're either going to be killed or have your mind wiped. And the mind wiping isn't the fun MIB kind where it's just a camera flash and then it's done. No, this is 40k. Most of this universe's methods of mind wiping are more intense. Also, the Grey Knights don't do the whole dropship thing generally. They prefer to teleport straight into missions, which makes their deployments and evacs very precise and fast. It really helps with keeping their chapter a secret, and just showing off how high tier their gear is compared to most military units in the Imperium, who are lucky if they get a box of wings to take them to most of their missions. That's most of the essentials you need to know about the Grey Knights, very powerful psychic demon slayers who were created to be incorruptible. Though you don't have the best the Grey Knights have to offer at the start of the game, since you only have a small group of knights who are battered and bruised after just finishing a long campaign, where your previous commander Captain Agravain, who didn't fight in vain, barely managed to defeat a greater demon of Khorne at the cost of his life. Which gets you a promotion to be placed in charge and lead what's left of the Grey Knight detachment back home to Titan to heal up and make much needed repairs to your ship, the Baleful Edict, which I keep wanting to call the Baneful Edict. I've got too many Bane blades on the brain. Anyway, on the trip home you get pulled over by an Inquisitor named Cartha Vakir, who not so much requests but rather orders you to help her investigate a potential demonic problem in a nearby sector. And even though technically the Grey Knights and Inquisitors are equally ranked in the Imperium, where they only answer to the Emperor directly and no one else, which means they could refuse, the ship's command crew of Brother Ektar, your military advisor, and Dominus Lunette, the tech priest in charge of keeping the ship running, hesitantly agree to help the Inquisitor in order not to cause issues, because if hands get thrown between two such high-ranking Imperial organizations, like entire planets can get blown up or a smallish interstellar civil war can happen, because the Emperor is not really available to call a timeout, so we should try to avoid that. This starts with a campaign where you uncover and fight against a plot by the demonic forces of the plague god Nurgle, who are spreading disease via chaos-infused seas that, if it gets out of hand, could at a minimum cause a galaxy-wide pandemic, or at worst open the gates to the warp, aka hell. And all you have at the moment to beat all of that is a few leftover Grey Knights from a near-failed previous campaign on a pretty damaged ship only held together by a tech priest's hopes and prayers. Oh, and the Grey Knight Grandmaster you report to and get supplies from isn't too convinced of the threat you're facing, so you're not going to get the full support you need for quite a while. This gives the game a fairly oppressive feeling at the start, which is actually pretty fitting for the Grey Knights since they are usually in situations facing up against huge odds and getting stuff done with minimal resources. But even this beginning puts them more on the back foot than they maybe usually are. Did I mention this game has a reputation online for being hard? Like, when you start a new game it recommends starting on easy, which I haven't seen too often in many other games, which did worry me a bit. though it does give you a few options on how hard you want to make things for yourself, and after playing through it on normal and hard, I think most of the difficulty is just getting used to how the game wants you to play it. Which, if you're coming from a turn-based strategy game like XCOM, is a bit different. Like, XCOM generally encourages you to play cautiously and take enemies out of range, though there are exceptions, while Chaos Gate Daemonhunters wants you to play a bit aggressively and getting close to the enemy with more melee attacks than ranged ones, though it has its own exceptions.
Purify this place.
Plus, the game isn't great at showing you how you should try to trigger fights and move across its maps, which, if you come in blind to this game, will make things much harder and frustrating for yourself. Though I'll come back to that in a bit. If you get past that learning curve, and if you've been in a strategy game before this, you can probably take this game on and have some fun absolutely destroying the forces of chaos. This game has a bit of a legacy too, as it's a sequel to a much older game from 1998 that was also called Chaos Gate. And it had a very similar setup with you leading survivors from a previously almost failed campaign, but you played as the true blue poster boys for 40k, the Ultramarines in that one. I actually wanted to review that game first, but the forces of chaos seemed to not want me to play it, as I ran into technical issues with it constantly crashing in the second mission, but the tech priests at GOG seem to be working on it, so maybe one day I can come back to it. The only opinion I have on it at the moment is it has a cool start menu. I really like the spinning skulls shooting lightning at each other. But back to Daemonhunters. Unlike its progenitor, the game runs pretty great. I had no issues really, and only a few minor visual bugs running it on PC, though I have heard there are some problems on console. But I haven't played it on there, so I can't say for sure. Apparently the consoles didn't get the DLCs ported over either, so it looks like the best way to currently play the game is on PC, which kinda sucks for people on consoles. They've had a hard time lately. Well, let's be fair, everyone in gaming is having a hard time lately. Speaking of which, why does this game have a reputation for being so hard? Well, I think it's a combination of things. First, the game doesn't do a great job at showing how its combat systems work. Like, its tutorial isn't bad, and Captain Agravain will show you the basics before his duty ends. But the game doesn't show you its specific mechanics for starting combat, or how you should generally move around its maps to get the best chance of success, which in most cases is moving your squad across the map in a tight group while making sure none of your knights run too far ahead of the others in case they trigger groups of enemies. Like, there's this very important mechanic that you only find out about by reading the game's codex under key concepts, which is helpfully called start of combat. Basically, once you trigger a group of enemies, your squad gets all their action points back. So it's ideal to get as close to the enemy without triggering them, which you can kind of guess from how far your knights can see in the fog of war, and them being able to sense groups of enemies. So the best way to start combat is moving your knights in a tight group and getting close. Then you can trigger the enemy group to get all your action points back and start taking them out. And most importantly, trying your best not to trigger any more enemy groups nearby, because if you drag in more enemies in, then things can get out of hand fast and you can end up in a really bad situation. Once you've beaten all the triggered enemies, the combat will end with your knights getting a free weapon reload and all the action points back, so you can go looking for the next enemy group or mission objective to trigger and start it all again. To me, the way the combat is set up is ideally you're supposed to take on one group of enemies at a time, and if you trigger more, you've messed up a little bit. But don't get me wrong, like, taking on two groups at once is doable and sometimes just unavoidable in this game, but if you can, even if you need to fall back a bit, you should try your best not to trigger more enemies. The second problem, in my opinion, is the UI doesn't do a good enough job in communicating when you are in or out of combat once your knights have been deployed. Like, a simple indicator somewhere or a slight difference in the screen could have shown the player the difference. Like, for example, in XCOM 2, before you get into combat, the screen has a slight light blue vignette, which I know for that game is showing you're hidden, but it also shows when open combat hasn't started yet. Something like that could have helped show when the combat phase has started and ends in this game. Because the only way you know when the combat phase has stopped is the audio cue of your knights reloading weapons and saying something like the enemy is defeated. Another problem, and this one might be a bit nitpicky, is the mechanic for starting combat is kinda missing something. Basically, you have to guess how close your knights can get to an enemy before triggering them. Like, you get used to it after playing for a while, but it could have been done a little bit better. Like, with some way of indicating if you move your knights here or there, it will trigger combat, because the way it's done now is pretty clunky. And maybe that's what the devs are going for, to keep a bit of randomness in the combat, but I would have preferred some indication or feedback that you're going to trigger the enemy, while still keeping the ability of the enemy to sometimes surprise you while they patrol. Like, I don't want a full-on ambush mechanic like in XCOM 2, just something to help show the start of combat, which the game already isn't very clear on. And the last problem might be that new players don't know that on most missions, if you get the main objective done, it's mission complete and it will immediately end with your knights getting teleported out, so you don't need to worry about the rest of the enemies on the map. So if you're on the last objective of a mission to take out a target and have a ton of enemies to deal with, then in most cases it's better just to focus on the target and forget about all the enemies guarding it and just take it out as quick as possible. Which really fits with the way the Grey Knights do things: go in, get stuff done, then get out quick. Though there are a few missions where this doesn't apply, but I'll get into that later. All of these mechanics and the slight learning curve come together to, I think, make the game harder on newcomers. Like, if you watch or read guides online, then they'll tell you all about this stuff, but if you go in not knowing about the key concept of the start combat mechanic, then you're in for a rough ride. Which is a bit of a shame, since I think the gameplay overall is really good and fits extremely well with how the Grey Knights do things in the setting. Like, you can tell there was some real care with how they tried to mix in the 40k lore and tabletop stuff for the faction with the gameplay as well. Even visually, you can tell they're very much going for a miniatures look from the tabletop for the knights. They also borrow abilities from the tabletop rules and tweak them a bit for how the game is set up. Even all the classes are really good interpretations of the way the Grey Knights fight. Like, you've got interceptors who can teleport around the map and quickly getting close to do some nice melee damage to enemies, and if you build them out with certain abilities, can hit multiple targets at once.
They will rot no more.
Another class is Justicars. They have some great support abilities. The one I use the most is Honor the Chapter, which gives extra action points to other Grey Knights. They are also solid frontline fighters in Terminator armor that can take a hit and give a few in return. Then there's the Apothecary, a really solid combat medic that gives some good buffs to your squad mates. Not so sure about the small chainsaw they use for healing, but hey, if it works then I can't really complain. Hope they at least clean it after using it on enemies though. There's also the Purgator, a long-range heavy weapon specialist who once leveled up is more like a sniper with a heavy machine gun. They are also good at taking out groups of enemies. Also, there are advanced classes that you only get in the mid to late game, which are slightly souped up versions of the regular classes, being the Paladin, Chaplain, Librarian and Purifier. All of the classes I found fun to mix and match into my squad and come up with different tactics to take advantage of some of the good mechanics the game has to offer, like the stun and critical hit system, which if you get good at using will make the game a much more satisfying experience. Stuns on most low and mid tier enemies aren't too hard to get going, as they have a limit for how many hits they can take before getting put into a stun state, and if you have a knight in melee range then you can execute them, which apart from just being fun to do and instantly killing the enemy, gives all your knights one bonus action point, which you can use to take out even more enemies on a single turn, and there are abilities and equipment you can put on your knights to maximize this if you want. Though in the late game and on harder difficulties this does become tougher to do. And there are enemies who are immune to being stunned, but for those you do still have options, because if you get a critical hit on them then you get your choice of either inflicting one of the game's many afflictions on them or just cutting off one of their dangerous bits, which makes them far less menacing in combat. And most of your Grey Knights have abilities that drastically increase the chance of getting critical hits on enemies, and a few of your Grey Knights like the Purgator can even do it at range. Though there is a cost to using all these powerful abilities, which is will points. You only have a limited amount on each knight, and they are hard to get back as you only get one will point back on a kill, even if you manage to kill a group of enemies in one shot. So you need to manage that carefully throughout a mission, and there are other costs to using will points. In every mission there is a warp surge bar that's slowly filling up on each turn, which when it fills up, old Nurgle tries to make your day worse by putting hazards on the map, taking away a small bit of your squad's health, or even giving some buffs to the enemies. Most of these are minor inconveniences, and there are various means of which to reduce the bar filling up as you go through the game, but generally if you take too long on a mission they can add up to give you a really bad time. And the warp surge bar fills up quicker if you use any abilities that require will points. It's a gentle reminder that there is a cost to using psychic powers and to finish missions as quick as you can. Again, it's very much how the Grey Knights do things, use as little resources to get things done as quick as possible. What also helps with that a bit is you can use the environment to get some extra damage in, or even kill enemies, like shooting down statues or knocking over pillars onto them. There might also be some explosives lying around in a level you can use too. You can also knock enemies off ledges to get instant kills. It's really fun to use grenades to do that. Another way the game gets you to push yourself to use less resources and maybe play a little different is with glorious deeds. These are optional challenges you can choose to take before a mission that can range from getting no critical injuries on a mission to not using any master crafted weapons. which if you manage to do will get you some extra requisition points, which are very valuable as it's the resource that lets you get all types of new armor, weapons, gear, and more knights from Titan that you get to pick from as post-mission rewards. It's a system that makes sense for the Grey Knights, since they have access to some of the best stuff in the Imperium, but there are limited supplies of it, and there are other Grey Knights fighting all across the galaxy that might need those things too. The gear and weapons are really important in this game, as it's the main way you can build out a knight to maximize their abilities and turn them into proper powerhouses in combat. And it's a way to customize them a little, well, at least gameplay wise, as visual customization on Grey Knights is a little strict. Like, you have your choice of various skull decor you can put in your knights, which I'm a fan of, but other than that, all your Grey Knights are going to look pretty similar to each other. Now, the guy in charge of giving you all this stuff is Grandmaster Kai, who is just a little grumpy at a random Inquisitor taking over one of the Grey Knight ships for what he sees as a minor investigation.
Grandmaster, I have commandeered the baleful edict. We face—
You have seized a Grey Knight strike cruiser.
He's not in a very giving mood, so you'll have to earn the right to request higher level rewards. You'll get the chance after every Grandmaster report, which lets you use requisition points to increase the level of the rewards. Level 1 stuff is okay, but the best rewards tend to start at level 2, so it's a good idea to save requisition to try and max those rewards out after each Grandmaster report as quick as you can. There are other things you need to worry about outside of combat, like trying to get the Baleful Edict back to 100% since it was in serious need of a service after Captain Agravain pushed it to the limit. To do that, you'll need servitors, which you can get as mission rewards. The more you get, the more the ship you can get up and running, and you're going to need it to help your knights heal quicker out of combat and level up faster too. And speaking of going faster, you're going to want to improve the ship's speed because the missions are going to be spread out all over the sector and there is a time limit on when they expire. You won't be able to reach all of them when they trigger every few days, but with improved speed you'll be able to take on more of them, which will get you more rewards per outbreak of the bloom. There are other upgrades for the ship you'll need, like more guns is always a good choice, and a Gila field, which trust me is a great investment. It helps keep the demonic turbulence to a minimum when traveling through the warp, and you really don't want bad things to happen while you're traveling through there. And it might also be helpful during the random events that can happen while you travel. I enjoyed these as they are sometimes stressful but otherwise interesting little stories where you get to choose how you can solve a problem or take advantage of an opportunity on the ship or in the sector and then see the consequences. Sometimes it's a choice between the lesser of two evils and crossing your fingers hoping nothing really bad happens, and other times you might just get a little reward for your trouble. It's also good at mixing gameplay with how things tend to get done in the Imperium. You either need to use force, bribery, or access to your crew, which will cost you something, either resources, time, or how effective your command crew is for a while. The other thing you'll focus on out of combat is researching stuff. This is probably one of the slightly weaker aspects of the game, as it can't lean on the classic research stuff like directly improving armor and weapons, since technically the Grey Knights have all the best of that already, and researching new technology is heresy of course. So it's going to be a small research tree that's mainly going to be used for gating off the story. Though it does give you armor and weapon upgrades in an indirect way with Chaos Seeds, which you extract from enemies, that at first are used for research but later can be used for purity seals which upgrade your gear. There is research that allows you to extract more seeds and reduce how many seeds you need for the purity seal upgrades, which are worth unlocking. Then there's research that will reduce warp surges and give you other small benefits, but the other main side of research is stratagems. These are powerful limited use cards you can use on a mission. They are really good, but you're probably just going to equip the first big two unlocks, being the Fun Pun or Quicksilver that gives one of your knights extra action points, and Gate of Infinity, which lets you teleport your knights to any visible location on the map. These are so good and useful in nearly all missions that it makes the rest of the stratagems feel a bit like filler, though the others do have some uses in specific missions. And stratagems are like half of all research, so there isn't much incentive or overwhelming need to unlock more research unless you want to progress the story. Like I said, it's not bad, but it is a weaker element to the game. It is solid enough when combined with the map and ship stuff to make for a satisfying strategic loop that goes well with the tactical side of your knights carving up demons. There is, however, one notable mechanic in the game that doesn't quite click with how I think the devs wanted it to. Okay, so Grey Knights are pretty tough. Like, if they get wounded in a mission, they don't need to take time off for a hospital stay. They can go into the next mission with a manageable debuff to their health, which will go away after enough time has passed, and will even be quicker if you upgrade your ship for faster healing. The only time you need to worry is if a Grey Knight's health goes to 0, but even then they aren't out. They can recover after a few turns, or you can heal them and they'll be back in the fight with half their health, though they'll need some intensive care and not be available for a while after that. They also lose points of resilience, which represents how many times a knight can get critically wounded. All knights have a limited amount of this, and if it gets to 0 and your knight loses all their health on the mission, then they will die. But as you level them up, they get more resilience points. So as you might have been able to guess, even though the game is a bit hard, it's going to take quite a lot to outright kill any of your knights. Which brings me to the slightly odd mechanic you can unlock on your ship called Commune with the Fallen. It lets you give ability points from your dead knights to ones which are still alive, and basically lets you overlevel your knights. And it's pretty cheap to unlock. I think it was included as maybe a comeback mechanic in case you start losing knights early in the game, so you could overlevel the knights you had left and make the following missions a bit easier to complete. But in practice, because your knights are so hard to kill, most people I think will never use this. Also, what's a little funny is this used to be the method you'd use to respec your knights, which luckily got changed with patches, and is now a separate option. Though I can imagine someone out there in the past struggling to kill one of their knights just so they could respec the others. That's kind of 40k logic. What might have been a fun alternative way to use this mechanic is maybe have a very rare mission where you can recover a dead Grey Knight. Like maybe the warp opens up on a planet revealing a dead knight who died long ago on a mission that got them trapped in the warp or something like that, and you have to go recover their remains. I mean, they could have even unlocked it from the start with the remains of Captain Agravain or something, just to get some use out of the mechanic. But anyway, let's focus on something you'll be doing a lot of instead, which is going on missions. Most will have you going after targets on a map to destroy with some side objectives thrown in. These will be the Bloom Spawn and Spreader missions. Not too hard at the start of the game, but do increase in difficulty as the game goes on. The best option with these, like I mentioned earlier, is to take out the main objective as quick as possible so you get teleported out fast. This however isn't the case with the Seed Spreader missions, where it seems simple at first. You just have to kill the enemies on the map who are carrying the seeds. Easy, right? Well, the tricky part is, unlike nearly every other mission in the game, once you complete the main objective you don't get teleported out straight away, but instead need to wait 3 turns in order for the mission to finish, while enemy reinforcements get sent against you. I kinda get what the devs were maybe going for with this by having at least one mission type where you have a near desperate last stand fighting against heavy odds and finally make it out, which it kinda does do the first couple of times you do this mission, but once you figure out the best tactic is to just fall back out of reach of the enemy, which gets really easy to do once you unlock the teleporter stratagem Gate to Infinity, then these missions turn into a bit of a time wasting slog at the end, where you hear Chaos Marines constantly laughing in the distance while they slowly take their turn. It's like they know. A slightly better way to end these missions and still keep them interesting would be if the devs instead maybe had 1 or 2 of the enemies carrying a teleporter disruptor on them, and if you kill them you get out quicker. It would at least give a reason to attack the enemy instead of just retreating back for 3 whole turns. Other than that, these are all okay bread and butter missions. There is just enough map variety to keep them interesting, and they do get more powerful enemies added to them as you get further into the game. Though there are much harder missions like the Morbus ones, which only appear if a planet's corruption level gets to 5. If you ignore them, then the Morbus gate will open. If 5 of those happen, it's game over. So you need to deal with those before that happens, which means you need to take the Inquisitor with you on a mission and have her close the gate. You'll have to make a beeline for the gate and kill all the enemies around it. Then the Inquisitor can start a ritual to get rid of it. It takes quite a few turns to complete, and you'll have to defend her from waves or enemies to finish the mission. It's a tough one that'll push you to use everything you have. There is another option if you don't want to deal with all that. You could use the Cryptman approach and just destroy the Morbus Gate with Exterminatus if you unlock it on the ship, which is a fun on-brand option, but you only get 2 shots of those, so blowing up your problems will only work for so long. There are more mission types, but those are in the DLCs, which since we are on the topic, let's get into those. The first DLC the game got was pretty underwhelming. It gave you the Grey Knight Garen Crow and his demon sword to join your lineup of knights as you go through the game. Like, he's a cool character, but doesn't add anything to the story or gameplay. You basically pay for the privilege of having one over-leveled Grey Knight. I mean, you can get it if you really want to, but to me this is a swing and a miss for paid DLC. Next was the Duty Eternal DLC. This one was way more substantial. You got more mission types involving getting resources from the Mechanicus. You also got access to Tech Marines, which are more of an indirect support class that uses special servitors. They're okay, just not my favorite class in the game. There's also a new defense mission where you need to protect 3 seed servitors that are being used for research from waves of enemies that are spread all over the map, with help from some regular guardsmen who I kind of feel sorry for as they only have weak las guns to fight against the monsters coming out of the warp. At least if they survive they won't have to remember anything. These missions are slightly stressful but a nice challenge and do add some more variety to the game. There are some really cool things in the DLC, like once you get far enough into the main campaign, you'll get a mission where you can unlock a frigate that will allow you to send an extra group of Grey Knights on missions, so you can cover more of the map when a bloom spawn happens and get more rewards and lessen the corruption on more planets. Though the outcome of frigate missions is not controlled by you directly, it's a little random, but the higher the level and better equipped the knights are you send on missions, the more likely they are to win. Though wounds are another thing, they will probably come back wounded at least a little. It's a good addition, though you should try to unlock it as quick as you can or you might not get that much use out of it during the campaign. The main thing the DLC gives you though is a Dreadnought, which is a very powerful unit that are basically mech coffins that badly injured Space Marines sometimes get put into to keep fighting for their chapter. You know, duty eternal. There is a restriction with using the Dreadnought though, as you can only use them in Technophage Outbreak missions, and you'll need them for those as they tend to have more and tougher enemies in them, but you'll get more rewards for doing those missions, so it's worth it. It's a bit of a compromise that you can only take the Dreadnought on certain missions, which I can understand might annoy some players, but if you took them on normal missions, they'd make them a bit too easy. And there is at least one Technophage Outbreak mission every bloom spawn, so you will get to have some fun with the Dreadnought. So all around I enjoyed the Duty Eternal DLC, it gives some nice additions to the game and some extra toys to play with. The last DLC in the game is Execution Force. This one is probably my favorite for the game, as it gives you access to elite agents of the 4 temples of the Officio Assassinorum, the most powerful assassins in the Imperium. All of them are really deadly and fun to use, but you need to be careful with them as they aren't as tough as the Grey Knights and can die pretty easily. The Calidus Assassin is a great starting choice for early in the campaign, as they can disguise themselves as the enemy and easily get close to them, which makes them an exceptionally great scout. And they can start fights for you with an advantage by using abilities to keep the enemies in place or disable their long range weapons for a turn. They're also just great at taking out groups of low to mid tier enemies, and their abilities get refreshed faster the more kills you get with them. They do fall off a little by the late game, but not by much, they are still pretty great even then. The Vindicator on the other hand is a long range sniper that's a master of getting critical hits at range to disable the enemy's nasty bits. They also get a one-shot ability kill on organic targets and can make enemies more vulnerable to attacks. And they also include a stealth option if needed for escape. They're probably the least showy of all the assassins, but they get the job done. However, if you prefer your assassins to get in close and be psychotic, then you can send out the Eversaw. These guys are hopped up on drugs to make them extremely vicious. They take a little mastering to get used to their abilities since they use their own health to power them, though they can get some health back from kills. They're not instant kill machines, but instead with them you need to build up stacks of the bleed affliction on enemies to get their max damage potential, and use that when you strike to kill an enemy. They are quite tanky if you get a lot of kills with them, and can run really far on a map if you need them to, though they aren't too great at drawn out fights. I love that they kept true to the lore with them in the game, as when they aren't out in a fight or are about to be deployed, they are stored in stasis the whole time since they're kept in a constant state of wanting to go on a murderous rampage thanks to the drugs, so having them just walking around would just be a really bad idea. My favorite assassin out of the bunch though is the Calexis. They are monstrously powerful once they get going. They were born with a pariah gene, which means they nullify all psychic things around them just by existing. And after some temple training and getting a cool scary looking mask, can use the null effect they have against anything that draws power from the warp, even if it's a tiny amount. There's way more to their lore, but I don't want to get too sidetracked, which is really easy to do with 40k. In the game they start fights with 0 will points, but will gain them whenever your knights use theirs for any of their abilities, or if the Calexis gets a kill. The more will points the Calexis gets, the stronger their attacks become, to the point they can start doing massive damage to enemies, and there's a chance each time they attack they can reduce the warp surge bar, and they're not affected by psychic powers, plus they gain armor equal to the amount of will points they have, and sometimes they also get extra action points. Like I said, absolute monsters, they're perfect for fighting against chaos. Even with all the assassins being a great addition to the game, there was one thing the Execution Force DLC introduced that I wasn't too keen on. A new mission type called Tantarus Hive missions. At first I hated these missions. In them you have to destroy a hive, but it's invincible unless you destroy 5 smaller germ nodes all around the map, which are pretty far apart from one another. And you start the mission in combat, so there's no going in and out of fights like in other missions to get your action points back and free weapon reloads. Also, every turn you'll be hit with an AoE attack from the hive, which gives your knights a damage affliction. It can hit all your knights in one shot if they're too close together as well. I think you can see why I didn't like these missions, but as I did more of them I got more okay with taking them on. as I figured out tactics to make them less painful to do, basically using knights with any teleport abilities to get around the map as quick as possible, also equipping knights with armor or equipment to negate afflictions if I could, plus using assassins that can sneak around or that can move really far in one turn, and just taking out enemies when I needed to and focus on getting all those nodes. And once that was done, mass teleport the knights with Gate of Infinity to the hive and finish it off.
The threat is vanquished. Well done, Commander.
It's like regular missions where you need to focus on the main objective, though they've turned up the pressure a lot, which forces you to use a lot more of the tools available to you. So I don't hate these missions anymore. I wouldn't call them fun either, but they are an interesting challenge and more mission variety is a good thing, I guess. But just with the addition of the assassins to the game, it makes this DLC really worth picking up, but it also might make the game a little easier if you are struggling. The game's story is also pretty good. It hits all the beats you'd expect from 40k. Grim characters with big egos and strong personalities that are all in tension with each other, fighting in ways they believe is right and just barely compromising with each other to focus on the actual enemies to the Imperium while being in a near hopeless situation. And if you get to know each of the main characters in the game a bit better with the extra dialogue options you get after progressing the story piece by piece, you can see where each of them are coming from. Like Brother Ektar, he's forced to stay on the ship and not allowed on missions as penance because in the past he trusted another Inquisitor to finish off a Demon Lord orchestrating a planetary uprising, only to come back much later and find out that Demon Lord had run amok and taken 2 Inquisitors and countless hordes of people into the warp. You might see why he distrusts the words of anyone from the Inquisition, as he's seen them fail spectacularly in the past. So when Inquisitor Vakir shows up all gung-ho about wanting to take out demonic forces by any means necessary, and investigate things far beyond what might be expected, there's going to be constant problems between her and Ektar. But if you also take time to chat with Vakir, you'll find out she's very driven to take out specifically the forces of Nurgle, who were the reason she was raised as an orphan, though there are hints throughout the story that her zealousness might be being taken advantage of, even if she truly wants to destroy the forces of chaos, which doesn't escape the notice of Ektar. And the resident tech priest Lunette is just there wanting to keep the ship together, with all that she sees as this irrelevant arguing happening around her. She's the most level-headed of the bunch, surprisingly, though slightly overprotective of the ship above everything else, but that's classic Mechanicus, machine before the flesh and all that. Though you do see that Lunette and Ektar have had a long working relationship, so they give each other shit but know when to listen to each other to get things done, and they do really respect each other for what they do. But my favorite character in the game is Grandmaster Kai. It doesn't hurt that he's voiced by Andy Serkis either.
As steward of the Armory of Titan, I had hoped you could release further assistance.
Don't thank me yet. I will give you 60 Tertean solar days to prove this threat warrants the deployment of an entire strike force. Battle-worn as it is, Strike Force Xiphos could be put to good use in several campaigns across the galaxy. Any further requisition from my arsenal will have to be earned.
But Typical.
What his character reminds me a lot of is like one of those movie police chiefs who has way too many things to worry about and really doesn't have time for hearing about hunches from Inquisitors who borrowed one of the Grey Knight ships without even asking. He's also pretty hard to get on your side to get the resources you need, but he eventually does come around, though I think he enjoys testing the Inquisitor's patience and also just cutting it off when he can. Even after he agrees how serious the situation is, he will still test you as the commander and see what you're willing to give up to stay on his good side, and be a good Grey Knight and use as little resources as possible. There's even a slight twisted sense of humor when he does it. He knows he's putting you on the spot and he wants you to squirm. Like there's one time he was almost being complimentary and saying, yes, your sector is in real trouble, but, well, just watch.
Are we to understand, Grandmaster, that more substantial reinforcements may be forthcoming? Perhaps a second strike cruiser?
Unfortunately, Inquisitor, this event has created a power vacuum that the other Lords of Chaos have now rushed to fill. Our brotherhoods are thoroughly pressed. So I must ask if I can relieve you of some of your surplus stores for the sake of the chapter.
Most of the campaign you're on the back foot, struggling to get the resources you need, and this guy knows that and still says, can you send me some resources? At the time I was like,
Hey!
But now looking back at it, I think it's kind of funny. So a pretty good lineup of characters and about what I expect from 40k, though not too generic, but they still fit the tropes in the setting. And just to get a little sidetracked, I could say the same about other aspects of the game like the music, though there were a few tracks that stood out to me and that I really enjoyed. Like the Inquisitor's theme music, which has an almost gentle choir that's underscored with a strong sense of urgency and determination. And the music that plays when you suit up your knights for a mission called Ready the Squad. It always gets me a little amped to send them out to fight. The song called The Chant is also really great, though that's a redone version of a track from the first Chaos Gate game, which I think was an Ultramarine chant, so cheating just a little, but it's so good it could be the theme music for all the Chaos Gate games, in my opinion. But back to this game's story. It goes mostly how you'd expect. Inquisitive Vakir does some slightly heretical research involving listening to whispers and visions in the warp.
You listen to voices in the Sea of Souls?
You object to my methods, Knight?
You are only human. You walk a dangerous path.
Yeah, it's a little dangerous, but she does find out the source of the demonic seeds you've collected while fighting the Bloom is an Aldari craft world, that when you investigate find is very infested by chaos, which Inquisitive Vakir insists she goes to have a closer look with the Grey Knights to see what Nurgle is up to. And after fighting to the center of the craft world, the Inquisitor comes across an Aldari avatar that hasn't been corrupted and she assumes is dormant, until it forcefully gives her information on what the craft world is being used for. Basically, it's been turned into a nursery to power up 5 greater demons of Nurgle. When Ektar hears this, his immediate response is to tell the Grey Knights there to destroy it all.
Brothers, prepare to fire!
You are here on my authority, Knight. Stand down!
The Inquisitor, however, wants to find out more about Nurgle's plan, and after communing with the ship's Infinity Circuit and not-so-dormant avatar, finds out that each of those greater demons are Reapers of the Bloom and carry a different seed strain of the virus that they plan to spread throughout the sector, with one already out spreading the Bloom you've been fighting and the other 4 still forming on the craft world. And the cherry on the cake is the reason they were created wasn't just to spread disease, but to use that disease as a way to collect souls to open gates to the warp, which would unleash chaos into real space and summon something big if enough of them were opened. But while we find all this out, the chaos forces on the craft world are reacting to the Inquisitor and Grey Knight presence and are coming to attack while those greater demons start rapidly maturing. Probably should get out at this point, but the Inquisitor wants to find out even more, which is a little reckless, so we have to defend her from the incoming hordes of chaos. And that's when this ugly piece of work rudely crashes the party.
Oh, what are my manners? Cadex Iron Cold. Cadex Ilkarian. Son of the 7th Blight, the beast of Systemonius. And now warden to our grandfather's most majestic gift, the Bloom.
Brothers, destroy this putrid prince.
This Demon Prince of Nurgle is a bit of a handful and has some annoying abilities, but once your Grey Knights get around those, he ain't all that.
A pity. I shall deliver your regards to my master.
That won't be the last time we see him, but we have bigger problems at the moment.
Commander, thousands of warp signatures have been detected.
Things aren't looking so great, and we're probably going to be overwhelmed soon, but that's when out of the warp the Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights, Kaldor Drago, appears and just wipes out all the enemies around us.
Grey Knights rally. Your chapter lord fights with us.
We are the hammer.
Okay, so quick explainer about who Mr. Drago is. He's the most powerful Grey Knight alive and was cursed by a fairly crafty demon prince to be stuck in the warp for 10,000 years. Though that only kind of slowed him down a little, as after wandering the warp for who knows how long and constantly being tempted and attacked by demons, and not once surrendering to any of that, he still continues to battle against chaos to this day. He's also known for sometimes dropping out of the warp for quick visits to real space when the Grey Knights need him the most, but he always gets sucked back into the warp eventually. I was quite surprised to see him in this game, as he's a fairly biggish named character in 40k. I mean, he's not a Primarch, but still, Kaldor Drago, that's pretty big. Which makes his introduction into the game a little underwhelming as he just pops out of the warp, with a few fades to black and white implying he fought and wiped out the enemies. Like no cutscene with a dramatic angle of him talking to Vakir, just a regular combat view? Like come on guys, where's the spectacle showing off the Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights? I mean, they did it for fairly minor characters like Captain Agravain. Even the Aldari avatar of Cain gets shown off more than Drago, and the Eldar aren't even in the game. Though maybe I'm being a bit overly nitpicky on that one. They do kind of make up for it later in the game. Anyway, back to the story. Vakir explains the situation with the 5 Reaper demons to Drago.
I commend your discovery, but the archenemy is alerted to your presence. You cannot remain. I task you, Kartha Vakir, to end this Bloom's corruption. Cut loose this rot before it spreads to the wider Imperium.
As you command, Supreme Grandmaster.
Drago then clears the warp interference so Vakir and the other Grey Knights can teleport out. Though back in the ship, we find out because of the visit to the craft world, the bloom has spread out further into the sector and other strains of the seed virus are on the loose. Ektar, as you can imagine, is really pissed about it, as it looks like the Inquisitor just made things much worse than they already were, which is kind of the opposite of how Vakir feels, as she thinks we're finally making progress.
Order is eroding, Inquisitor, yet you sound ecstatic.
You misread me, Knight. What we did was necessary. I am simply eager to move forward.
Forward? We face the destruction of this sector.
That conclusion is uncertain.
Yes, exactly. Listen to the venerable tech priest. We can't waste time lamenting a few minor setbacks.
Setbacks? Do you have any idea what
What our intrusion did was awaken the bloom's germinating seeds. While this may have had the side effect of activating new strains of the bloom, we have disrupted the Plague God's plans.
Pure speculation. You exalt your carelessness as a triumph.
This conversation vector is unproductive.
You can see the argument from both point of views, even if both are on the extreme from each other, which makes it kind of funny to see the tech priest be the most reasonable person, cyborg in the room. But with the new information gained from the craft world, the Inquisitor has a plan of action. We just need to kill all 5 of those Reaper demons who are carrying the Prime Seeds. If we kill all of them, that should end the bloom once and for all. And to track these Reapers who are really good at hiding while spreading more seeds, the Inquisitor needs to make something.
I will need a tool to track them by their sickly psychic stench.
Impractical. We possess no artifact capable of detecting such profane spiritual resonance.
Are you so certain? A shard of Wraithbone, pried from the Infinity Circuit that incubated the very evil we now face. I can bind the bloom seeds to this vessel and hunt the foul reapers by their psychic scent.
Corrupt energies, xenoarchaeotech. Inquisitor, you stand on the precipice of heresy.
We stand on the precipice of victory, Ektar. Would you honestly prefer we defy the direct orders of your chapter lord?
No, but I will be watching you, human.
Spare me your preening, Knight. Once I forge this tool, Codex Toxicus, we'll fall upon these reapers with the wrath of the God Emperor himself.
You might have noticed that Inquisitor Vakir is maybe a little unsure about this, but is pushing ahead anyway. That's not helping our case with Ektar, who now seems to have a good reason to be wary. These are the most intriguing bits of the story to me, like is Inquisitor Vakir hiding something, or just under a lot of stress from dealing with all the powerful psychic forces to get a job done? And is Ektar being overly cautious because of his past dealings with Inquisitors, and questioning and fighting on every method she uses to fight Chaos as reckless, since he's already decided in his mind she'll fail, without actually seeing what the results will be? It makes for good tension in the story and is a nice build up to see what will eventually happen. Though there were some surprises I wasn't expecting, but to talk about those I'm going to need to go into spoilers, so if you don't want those then skip to here. Okay, so we go hunting for those Reaper demons with Prime Seeds. When you do find one of them, thanks to research, you get a unique boss fight. These are okay, you teleport in with a little smack talk with the demon, and then start the fight and figure out the mechanics, and eventually take them out. Everything surprisingly starts going smoothly once we begin beating them. Ektar and Vakir start working together well, while purifying those seeds from each of those Reapers we killed. Though tracking those demons is taking a toll on Vakir and she seems to be getting weaker. Ektar starts worrying and keeps an extra eye on her, though it feels like it's only a matter of time until we finish off all the Reapers and end the bloom. That is until we've beaten 3 of them, then this happens.
Emergent nexus forming off the starboard bow.
Battle stations!
Bring on the void shields. Run out the guns.
What's happening?
The edict is breached.
Cadex and a bunch of Chaos forces board our ship and head straight to where Vakir is keeping the Codex Toxicus and destroy it. And are now trying to kill Vakir. This is when you need to help keep her alive while your Grey Knights rush in to reinforce her. It's one of the best fights in the game, I really enjoyed it. At first you're just trying to survive, but as more Grey Knights come in, the fight starts turning in your favour. Until we eventually beat Cadex, though...
Your precious codex is burned. The bloom will thrive!
We have him! This Warden of the Bloom!
Throne of the Emperor! Slay this creature!
We cannot! Without the Codex, the remaining Reapers will continue to spread their strains unimpeded. He is our only link to the Bloom.
Report. The enemy vessel is disengaging.
What? Those cowards.
It flees into the Sea of Souls.
Destroy it! Before...
So we have Cadex, but no way to track the rest of the Reapers, and Ektor and Vakir start arguing again about who's to blame for this disaster. Vakir does have a way to salvage the situation, and that's to probe Cadex's mind for more information, though it's very risky as she could become possessed.
If I fail in the task, do what you will with me.
If you falter for a moment, I will have no other choice.
He fears you, Carver. He is not my executioner, but he will be yours.
Things are bad, but then they get worse. As Vakir goes deep into Cadex's warped mind, she finds out that just being the Reapers won't stop the bloom. The actual roots of the bloom is what's keeping it going, and they are deep in the Garden of Nurgle within the warp, which is impossible for them to track or get to. And on top of that, there's no weapon we have that could destroy the roots either.
There is none left for you, Carver. Not even that disgusting Grand Master could help you now.
What did it say?
Contradiction. Caldor Drago travels the warp freely.
Throne!
Additional. He bears the Titan sword.
No purer blade has ever existed.
Uncertain. However, no armament exists on Titan which surpasses it.
We must try to reach him.
So all we need to do is get in touch with Caldor Drago. Vakir snaps out of a demon depression and comes up with a way to reach him by using the 3 prime seeds we have and performing a ritual on a planet in a warp storm. We manage to find a place and do the ritual to get Caldor Drago's attention, which works. Vakir then tells him to sneak his way into the Garden of Nurgle and cut the roots with his sword to finally destroy the bloom. So we've just barely averted a complete disaster, right? We just need to hang back while the Supreme Grand Master does the heavy lifting and we win. Well, once Vakir gets back to the ship, she looks again into Cadex's mind and finds him talking to someone who seems very happy that Caldor Drago is going into the garden.
No!
It appears we are being watched, my lord. Hello, little spy.
It turns out Cadex somehow used Vakir in a weakened state to tell his master that Drago is on his way, so now he's walking into a trap.
Have we just damned the Supreme Grand Master to an ambush and death?
Precisely.
No, Ektar. I only did what I believe necessary to advance our cause.
Our cause now? Inquisitor Vakir, with one blow, you have turned all of our efforts to serve the aims of chaos. With your leave, Commander.
You are right. I have failed us.
Ektor! Analyze. The Inquisitor is the only being with an erudite understanding of what we face. Without her, we are truly lost.
Without the Supreme Grand Master, we have already lost.
This act is reckless. The Inquisitor's biodiagnostics have not yet totally collapsed.
So you would have us follow this traitor until she does?
This is too much. Like children.
Rationalize. We have all been deceived. Counter-proposal. We intervene on the Supreme Grand Master's behalf.
Are your logic pathways fried, Dominus? No mortal can navigate their way through the Garden of Nurgle.
No mortal.
Silence! Your words have done harm enough.
Hector! In 987 years, I have not observed a Grey Knight falter in his duty. Yet you fear this?
Say your piece, Fakir.
It is true. No mortal can find their way to the Garden of Nurgle, but a demon will always return to its master.
What?
Yes. Cadex has burrowed into my mind. If you were to banish him, I might use that connection to track his spirit as it returns past the veil, back to its master.
This to me is peak 40k storytelling. The situation just keeps getting worse and worse while the characters are forced to make near impossible grim decisions as a result. Like, Hector wasn't wrong, Vakir wasn't strong enough to hold off the influence of Cadex, but there wasn't really another option, and if she hadn't tried to find out more, they wouldn't have found out the actual source of the bloom. Even destroying the Reapers on the Craft world wouldn't have stopped it, so she was right to push to use Cadex. Though she was pretty much doomed following that path as well. It was a no-win situation where everyone was just doing what they thought was right. But even with everything going to shit, there's still a chance, thanks to Domino and Lynette keeping a level head and seeing a slight possibility at fixing the situation. It really makes for compelling stories seeing these strong personalities crash into each other and deal with these near impossible problems. Anyway, Vakir begins a ritual to banish Cadex and use their connection to track his spirit back to the Garden of Nurgle. The ritual itself takes a while, but once near completion starts to cause problems on the ship, though Hector insists we push through and we get one final twist in the story. It looks like Vakir couldn't hold out anymore and has fallen to chaos.
Cadex Ilkarian of Systemonius, I give myself to you willingly. Take my spirit.
Fakir!
You were right to doubt me, Hector. A demon's essence cannot be tracked past the veil, but mine is now bound to his. I will blaze a path for you to follow.
You sacrifice yourself, you are doomed to an eternity of torment.
I doomed myself the moment I set foot on this ship. Now, the Grandfather calls. I must answer. I am his.
What strength.
Follow me, Hector, to the garden.
I hear you.
I did not see that one coming. Vakir giving up her soul and being stuck in hell forever to fix a mistake is pretty hardcore. Not many humans in 40k would be able to do that, and Hector finally seems to understand her level of commitment, which I think has changed his opinion on Inquisitors. We begin tracking Vakir's soul as it goes through the warp, which takes weeks and gives the baleful edict a pounding, but we do eventually make it to the Garden of Nurgle, though we need to fight a Reaper and beat it to get in. Then we can finally warn Kaldor Drago about the trap he's walking into.
Grandmaster, hear me!
Brother, I hear you.
Supreme Grand Master, we are near. I sense your spirit within the garden.
The hour must indeed be dark if you have conspired to reach me here.
Forgive us, my lord, the cost was great. You are walking into a trap. A massive host of Nurgle approaches your position.
This maze confuses my senses. The Bloom's power here is overwhelming, yet I cannot afford to withdraw. The stench of these roots are plain. My cursed life is a small price to wager against ending this foul affliction.
Then we will fight for you, Grand Master.
A great sacrifice must not go unheeded. Very well. I will take 8 volunteers, Hector. 4 shall join me to face the foulness within. 4 will hold this gate against the approaching horde until we can complete the deed.
So few.
Each of my brothers is an army unto himself, a mighty shield against the coming darkness. I cannot deprive the Imperium of its most valuable warriors for the trials that yet lay ahead.
Your will be done. We are the Hammer.
That was a cool cutscene. It kind of makes up for Kaldor's slightly lackluster intro. So we pick our best 8 knights and do the final mission of the game, which is a boss fight against the fallen Primarch and now Demon Prince Mortarion, who has a bit of a history with Kaldor Drago since Kaldor beat him and gave him a heart tattoo, which he didn't like but now he's stuck with for eternity. The final battle feels pretty epic as it's an all-out fight with the Grey Knights on the outside battling to defend against a huge onslaught of enemies coming in to reinforce Mortarion, while inside your knights fight along Kaldor Drago to stop a powered-up Mortarion who's using the roots of the bloom to make himself invincible. Though after a long battle of destroying the roots one by one and holding off what feels like endless waves of enemies, Mortarion finally falls.
Drago! You cannot win! Cadex, you treacherous worm! What have you wrought? I did only as requested, Master! Plague comes for the Imperium. I have eternity to ensure it festers.
That's typical Mortarion, always running away. Typhus is probably going to mock him when he gets back. Anyway, even with the Bloom defeated, we are still deep in the warp against endless hordes of demons, but Kaldor Drago and the Grey Knights who you sent to fight with him decide to stay and draw the attention of Nurgle, while Hector and Lunette can escape on the Baleful Edict back to real space. It's almost a bittersweet ending where you finally beat the Bloom but you had to surrender all your best Grey Knights to the warp to do it, along with Fakir sacrificing herself. Though to be honest, for any Grey Knight, getting to fight alongside the Supreme Grand Master in the warp is probably a dream come true for most of them. Once back in real space, Hector gives a nice tribute to Inquisitor Fakir, commending her on her sacrifice to help humanity. And then the credits roll, but we get a post-credit cutscene with Cadix's skull getting one last pummeling from Kaldor before leaving. Though what I assume is left of Vakir's soul pops up before being captured again by Cadix, who seems to have future plans for her. I wouldn't mind seeing them carry on the side story with Vakir in the sequel, which they might in some way, but we'll have to wait and see. I really enjoyed the game's story. It's got everything I like seeing in this setting, while giving me a few interesting twists that keep it from being too predictable. It was also fun seeing the Grey Knights in action and being featured in the game, which probably isn't going to happen too often in the future. Overall, the game is really good. The devs did a great job at translating how the Grey Knights operate in the lore and turning that into gameplay. It's not an easy thing to do. The game does have a bit of a learning curve, which it could have avoided by going a little more in detail in its tutorial, but once you get how things work, it can be a really fun game to play. So I would definitely recommend picking this game up if you're looking for a good 40k experience. There is a sequel on the way which isn't going to feature the Grey Knights but the Death Watch chapter, the Space Marines, instead. They are another group that works closely with Inquisitors, so we'll see more of those in that game. The Deathwatch chapter might also feature in that Astartes 2 animation when it finally comes out. It's a pretty good idea going with the Deathwatch for a sequel for the game, since it's a chapter that gets to use some of the best Space Marines from all the other chapters, and put them in one group to fight against the worst aliens in the galaxy. So if you have a favorite chapter, you'll probably see at least a little of them in that one. It'll probably also open up some more variety and interesting gameplay options too. But we'll see how that game turns out. If it keeps the same quality as Daemonhunters and refines a few things, it could be pretty good, though I don't want to jump the gun on that one. Anyway, thanks again for making it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you haven't already, maybe consider throwing a like or sub my way. You can also support the channel on Patreon if you deem me worthy of patronage. But again, thanks for watching, see you next time.